Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year, and welcome to episode 18 of Scotonomics. Tonight we're going to be discussing the Catalan economy, but the first thing I'd like to do is to welcome my co-host, Kieran van Sweden. Hi, Kieran, how are you doing?
I'm good, and Happy New Year to all of our viewers.
Yes, and we've got different viewers this first episode because there will be people who are watching us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Previously, for our first 17 episodes and our specials, we've just gone to YouTube. So welcome to those audiences. You can comment and we can bring your comments on, and hopefully this is our first shot at these other platforms, but hopefully we've got a little bit more interaction from you tonight. Fascinating topic, discussing Catalonia. Anyway, Kieran, what have you been up to so far this week?
So this week, a really interesting article by the Byline Times highlighted the growth in inequality between London and Northern England. And it shows that it's grown markedly in 10 years and that these inequalities are largely a product of our housing market. And I think our episode of Laurie McFarlane really gives great background to how this has occurred. So apparently Londoners bought homes outside the capital worth 27.6 billion in 2020. So, you know, that's really quite a stunning figure, you know, and I'm hearing that affecting different people across Scotland as well. There's definitely big money coming in and buying properties and bidding well over the asking prices. Yeah. So I've also been reading the World Inequality Report, which also doesn't present the UK in a good light, with the bottom 50% share of income being 20.4%, and their share of wealth is just 4.6%. So that's a pretty shocking figure as well.
Can you repeat that one, Kieran?
So it seems that the bottom 50% of the UK population's share of income is 20.4%, and their share of wealth is 4.6%, which is really shocking. But some good news, William. We've also discovered this week that gorse is the key to Scotland's food sovereignty, thanks to research from Aberdeen's Professor Wendy Russell from the University of Aberdeen. So that's great news, especially for vegetarians. And our viewers can hear more about food sovereignty in our first episode with Fidel Kaboub and in episode 6 with Mike Small. So that was really interesting. And then also this week as well, we've heard that the Federal Reserve are moving towards quantitative tightening. So I would like to get someone onto the show to talk about quantitative tightening and quantitative easing.
Sounds painful.
Yeah. So and the other thing that caught my attention as well is that retailers in the UK are also reporting downturns in sales and are concerned that, of course, energy prices, they're increasing, national insurance is increasing, and that will impact upon them. So lots of things coming up this week in economics.
Yeah, it's been there's definitely a change in the global economy in terms of how much money is likely to be injected into the economy. You know, we've had this huge amount of quantitative easing since 2008, and it looks like there's going to be much more restriction of the money supply, with interest rates going up as well. So it will definitely affect a lot of the things that we're covering this year. It will be in a slightly different perspective, I think. I've got one kind of breaking story from Catalonia, and it's definitely the most shocking story of the year so far. And it's understandable that everyone in UK is fixated on what's happening with Boris Johnson and these parties. I think it's a sad reflection of our society that we're demanding his resignation for a party rather than the complete disaster of 150,000 COVID deaths in the UK. But that's a separate matter. What's happened in Catalonia is that a former leader of the Catalan police has said that the Spanish National Intelligence Agency were aware that there was going to be a terrorist attack in Barcelona in 2017. There was actually two. There was one in just down the road from here, and then there was one on the Las Ramblas, and this was in 2017. And he's saying that the Spanish basically Secret Service knew of this attack, but thought it would play well in terms of undermining the Catalan independence referendum, which is due to take place a little bit later. And it looks like they were keen to give these terrorists a little bit of space, knowing that they could possibly commit an atrocity which would strengthen the Spanish case. Now, he's made these accusations in the Spanish Supreme Court. So it's a huge story, and I would expect to see hopefully a lot of other media picking it up. But it's a really big story in Catalonia at the moment, and it would be truly shocking if they were willing to play politics with terrorists in Catalonia. So that's a huge story developing here. I mentioned that specifically because we are covering the Catalan economy tonight. Now, we had a wonderful interview which Kieran's going to introduce us all to. Just saying, we spoke to Elisenda for over an hour. We covered a lot of different things, but for tonight we've just got 35 minutes on the Catalan economy, a little bit of the press towards the end, but it's really looking into the Catalan economy as much as possible. Kieran, over to you.
So our guest tonight is Elisenda Paluzie Hernandez, and she is a Catalan economist, politician and professor. And since the 24th of March 2018, she has been president of the Asamblea Nacional Catalana, a Catalan independence organization. And we are going to speak to her tonight.
Elisenda, thank you very much for joining us on Scotonomics, our Small Nation series. Today we're going to talk about Catalonia and its similarity and its differences from Scotland. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me today.
The first thing I'd like to know is just, I suppose, a little bit more about the Catalan economy. What underpins it? How big is it? What are the main services and the products that the Catalan economy relies on?
Well, the Catalan economy is an economy that is like an average, if independent, it would be like an average country in Europe. It would have like the GDP per capita similar to that of France. And in terms of size, total GDP, like similar to a country such as Finland, for instance. The GDP of Catalonia in 2020 was 2021 is about 240 billion euros, and its weight on this is 19% of the total Spanish GDP. The economy is still quite industrial, although the industry has lost the importance it once had. But more or less, the industry's weight is like 20% of Catalan GDP. And then services is the most important part. And within services, it is true that tourism accounts for an important share of the Catalan economy. One of the reasons that pandemics, that the COVID crisis hit fiercely the Catalan economy because of all the tourism services had to shut down, and mobility was reduced and so on. And another characteristic that has the Catalan economy and especially its industry, it is that it's a quite open economy. Its exports are important. Nowadays, of everything, what is produced in Catalonia and not sold in Catalonia, 65% goes to foreign markets and 35% to the rest of Spain, the Spanish market. And that has been, this internationalization has increased, especially since Spain joined the EU in 1986.
So rough those percentages again. What goes outside of Spain?
Of what is sold, not in Catalonia, not in the Catalan market, 65% goes abroad, and 35% is sold in the rest of Spain.
Okay, so that is
more abroad than in the rest of Spain,
yeah.
Because this one was one of the main arguments of the unionists at the time, and they have used this argument a lot. Like, the Catalan economy will suffer a lot because if it becomes independent, then Spanish consumers will boycott Catalan products and will stop buying Catalan products. The truth is that the weight of our sales to the Spanish economy is reduced year by year. It's weighing each year. Its weight is inferior.
Yeah, that's the idea of the internal Spanish market and it being of real importance to Catalonia. I believe that the rest of the UK is our biggest market, so it's more than what we sell to Europe and the rest of the world. How important is Barcelona as a city to the Catalan economy?
Well, it's very important. Maybe not only Barcelona, but the whole metropolitan area around Barcelona. We have a little bit of a problem of concentration of economic activity in the metropolitan area in Barcelona. I think that we should need to have a more balanced economy in that respect. Although it is true that there's also Tarragona, from the industrial point of view, is still important because it has all the chemistry, and Girona has not the whole area of Girona is not bad in terms of industry, but still it is true that the Barcelona's metropolitan area is very, very important.
Yeah, and obviously, as you know, we have a similarity with the kind of central belt in Scotland, and when we're looking towards an independent economy, then we would really hope that the economy would spread much more across the country than it currently is. Do you think that being part of Spain has hampered Catalonia being more diverse in terms of their economy, or do you think that would just be the same had Catalonia been independent for the last 10 or 20 years? Do you think it's a function of the state?
Well, I think it's not only that, because this tendency of concentration of economic activity in metropolitan areas is like global. But it is true that if you have a public state that invests, especially in terms of infrastructure, like railroads and so on, and gets all the areas of the country better connected, then it could compensate that a little bit. I see that in Europe there are countries such as the Netherlands that are much more balanced in that respect. So I think that this is independence would be an opportunity to invest in a more balanced way and to try to compensate this disproportion of the economic activity being concentrated in Barcelona.
Kieran, did you notice that when you were living in the Netherlands that there was a broader spread of the economy across the country?
Yeah, the Netherlands seem to be just a much better run country altogether in many respects. I don't know about the spread of, I mean, certainly, Den Haag, The Hague, this is the centre of government, whereas Amsterdam is the centre of commerce. And you see something similar in Germany as well, where, you have obviously Berlin is the centre of government, but, Frankfurt is the centre of finance. So there's lots of different, whereas here in the UK, of course, we have everything's in London, and that has caused huge imbalance here.
And Elisenda, and when we're thinking about the relationship of Catalonia to the rest of Spain, could you give me a feel for the infrastructural support that Catalonia gets compared to the other autonomous regions? Because I know this is something that's often spoken about. Well, I live in Barcelona and I see the infrastructure compared to Scotland, and I think surely we can't be complaining here. But what is the feel from Catalans in terms of that investment from Spain?
Well, the figures are very clear. Public infrastructure, in terms of like roads, trains, and all this type of public infrastructure, the Spanish government invests in Catalonia only 9% of its total investment, while the Catalan GDP is 19% and Catalan population is 16%. So we are clearly underfinanced in terms of infrastructure. Much more, even the disproportion is very striking, more than in the other public services.
I have a question. I am interested in your unemployment rates. I know that there's been massive unemployment in Spain in general. How does it compare? How does Catalonia compare with other areas in Spain?
Yeah, Catalonia always has unemployment is high in relative terms as compared to Europe average. But as compared to the Spanish average, Catalonia has always 3-4 points less unemployment than the Spanish average. For instance, last year, unemployment in Catalonia was 12%, and in Spain, including Catalonia, 15% rate of unemployment.
Yeah,
so,
so
it's the difference is always 3-4 points less unemployment in Catalonia. The only time in the history, in the last decades, when Catalonia's unemployment was higher was in the 80s, in the crisis that followed the second oil crisis, because the industry was the most affected at the time. And as Catalonia was had a lot of industry at the time in the 80s, it suffered more. But since the late 80s, even during the crisis, the unemployment is still less in Catalonia than in the rest of Spain. That is important in terms of something that is has been a matter of discussions in the independence discussion process, which is pensions. Because as you know, we have a pay-as-you-go system, so pensions are paid by people that are working. So if you have more people working, more active population, and among the active population, more people that is working, then it is your pension system is going to be more sustainable. And the other issue that is important for the pay-as-you-go system of pensions is demography. And in terms of demography, Catalonia is more or less similar to Spain. Many centuries ago, it was different because Catalonia had its demographic change before Spain, so we had less natality at the time. But that has changed, and nowadays and for the last decades, the demographical situation of the rest of Spain and Catalonia is quite similar. Maybe slightly better for Catalonia, but very, very slightly, because of immigration rates that are higher in Catalonia. And as immigration tends to be younger, then that compensates a little bit the huge demographic problem that we have in Catalonia as well as in Spain, because
and Europe overall,
and Europe as a whole. But the Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, and Catalonia is not different in that respect. Suffers a lot because we have one of the populations that have more elders and less youngsters, and the rate of natality, the fertility rate is very, very low.
Has this situation come about through joining the Eurozone? Was that the instigator of this much larger these much larger unemployment figures? You know, I understand that the Eurozone were imposing a 3% deficit limit. Is this the reason? Was it a loss of civil servants? Did you have to unemploy civil servants?
No, I think it's a structural problem that the Spanish economy has always had, even before the the euro. This unemployment being higher than in the rest of Europe has been always there, this problem. It has to be, there's the structure of the economy, the fact that you depend so much in services that are, you also have this type of jobs that related to the tourism industry that have up and downs, and also, well, it has attributed also of the conditions of the labor market. That it would be an issue. Well, here we enter in an issue that has ideological issues as well. It has said that the Spanish labor market is not flexible in the sense that the Scandinavian markets are, for instance. So you have this protection of the insiders and difficulties for the outsiders to enter in the market. There's also a problem of dropouts from school. Construction was a problem. The bubble in construction in the 2000s was huge. It attracted a lot of young people that drop out from school at 16, 17 without finishing their studies because they were earning a lot in the construction sector, and they didn't need to study for that. And then when the construction sector entered into the crisis in 2008, then huge unemployment and difficulties in putting these people in other sectors because they lack the education, the training to adapt to other sectors. So it's quite complex. But I wouldn't say it was the Eurozone that caused the unemployment.
I wanted to kind of tie off this idea of infrastructure and the Catalans being, really upset that the lack of infrastructure here. And you've given us the figures, which are quite shocking. But I do want to tell our audience in Scotland that where I am, I'm about 2 miles away from a dedicated high-speed rail link from Barcelona to Madrid. Nothing else on that line apart from the high speed. And about 500-600 meters up the road from me, there's a new high-speed rail link being built to connect Barcelona to France. And in the UK, we've just had HS2 stopping now. I think it's stopping at Leeds. It might not even be going that far, but there's a high-speed rail link in and out of Barcelona from kind of like both ends. And in Scotland, we're still completely separate from any kind of major infrastructure, any major railway infrastructure. And I don't think we complain enough. And having lived in Catalonia for 6 years now, it's certainly something that I'm happy to say that the Catalans are very happy to announce their disagreements with any form of government, be that local or national or international. So I do think what we try and do on the show is highlight how peculiar the United Kingdom is, that this infrastructure just doesn't exist. But I do want to ask you a little bit more about pensions. Could you give me a little kind of breakdown on how the pension scheme works as part of Spain, and perhaps what the Catalan independence movement would like to do with pensions when Catalonia becomes independent?
Well, as I said, the pension system is a pay-as-you-go system. So it's when you work, the firm has to pay 30% of its cost, of its labor cost, goes to the social security. So I don't know if someone is earning 30,000 euros for the firm is paying 30% more and is paying for the social security, of the worker. But this money that goes to the social security, which is central, it's we don't have a Catalan social security, so it's a completely centralized system. with the money that the Social Security receives, they pay for the pensions of the people that are retired. So it's important that you have a lot of people working to be able to pay the pensions of the people that are that are retired. So before the referendum, we did some calculus on how an independent Catalan social security system would work, because it is true that in the last years, the Spanish social security system has entered into deficit. So with the money that is provided by the contributions to the social security of the workers, it is not enough to pay for the pensions. It's running deficits each year. So now it's with the money coming from normal taxes, from the other taxes, that they are compensating this deficit. And we did this calculus of how a Catalan social security system would work. And in the times that we didn't have deficits in the Spanish system, in the Catalan social security would have generated important, very, very large surpluses. But that at the time they went to the big to the central system. And now that the system is in crisis, Catalan social security also would run a deficit, but much smaller in size, in relative terms, than that of the Spanish system as a whole. And the reason is this difference in the unemployment rate, the fact that we have more people working, and also the fact that the people that are working, in general, the average wage is higher, so they are also paying more to the social security. The contribution to the social security is higher. Then, of course, the pensions are also higher. The pensions are related to what you earned when you were working, and it's a little bit higher in Catalonia, but still, on the whole, an independent social security for Catalonia would be more sustainable.
And in Catalonia, would we be looking, if you know, you mentioned that there was a difference between Catalonia and how much it was paying into the gross pot, but is there any plans for that pension to increase when Catalonia was independent?
Well, it is true that we said that we could increase a little bit the pensions, but we were quite cautious, because as we know that we have this huge demographic problem, and that there's also something to take into account, is that the baby boom in Catalonia was later than in the rest of Europe. So the baby boomers are not the people that were born in the 50s or 60s, but people that were born in the late 60s and 70s. So when these baby boomers will retire, it's going to be a mass of people retiring at the same time, and a very little people working because of the demographic change. So we were cautious in saying that we would be able to increase the pensions. The concept that we were using during the independence debate was the pension system would be more sustainable. So we can guarantee better the pensions in the future, and especially when the baby boomers entered in retirement, if we are independent.
Okay, no, that's interesting. Of course, when we're looking at amounts, we've got to bear in mind the cost of living in places, because that's obviously the most important thing. And you know, €1,000 in Catalonia might go a lot further than €1,000 would in Scotland. So it's not just as clear as matching those figures. That cost of living is important.
Yes. Infrastructure. Sorry, because you were mentioning the high-speed trains, and it is true that we have this high-speed train now from Madrid to Barcelona, and then from Barcelona to Perpignan, to the northern Catalonia in France. And then from Perpignan to Montpellier, it is not high speed. It runs the same train, but not in high speed rails. But we we complain. We in Catalonia we complained a lot because of the only thing. There has been a huge money invested in high-speed trains in the whole of Spain, to the point that nowadays Spain is the second country in the world after China with more high-speed rail tracks and trains. And one thing that the economists we know is that these high-speed trains are not very efficient, in the sense that, they are not well. It is not the best communication for merchandises, for commodities, for instance. Mm-hmm. And also it connects the big cities, but it leaves many smaller towns without anything. And the whole investment in the high-speed trains in Spain has been an investment that has been done to connect Madrid. The objective is to connect Madrid by high-speed trains with all province capitals in Spain. So it's done with a very centralistic mentality, and not at all an economic mentality. Because from an economic point of view, what we would have needed, and it would have been much less expensive, would have been a rail track connecting from the south of Spain through the coast to the northern markets of Europe for commodities, what we call the Mediterranean axis.
Yeah.
Because a thing that was done when Spain invested in trains in the 19th century is that they chose a different size for the rail tracks. So trains cannot go directly to Europe because the rail track is of a different size, and that kind of isolated Spain from the rest of Europe. And that's also one of the reasons that all commodities or merchandises go through the highways, through the Basque Country and through Catalonia, through Figueras, La Junquera. And for many reasons, including climate change reasons, it's not good to have all these trucks continuously in the highways. This is an investment that would have been less expensive, and that has been delayed. Now it seems that they are doing they are starting to do a little bit of this project, but it's a project that Catalonia has been asking for it for the last 30 years or 40.
Well, that is interesting, because obviously we see that in the United Kingdom as well, that everything has to go through London, and that's something that's very similar with the position of Madrid in Spain and London in the United Kingdom. So it's really interesting. Now I'm going to be looking at the trains that I see and working out how much smaller they are than the ones that are coming from the north, or when I go back to Scotland. So I'd like to kind of chat about the options for an independent Catalonia, because obviously your situation is very different from where Scotland finds itself, and that you're using the euro at the moment. Scotland is obviously using the pound at the moment. How do you unpick that when we're moving towards an independent Catalonia in terms of its currency and its monetary sovereignty?
Well, there are several options. It is true that each option, in terms of each monetary option, has its advantages and its difficulties, its costs. So keeping the euro would give certainty, while having another currency, not only you are becoming independent, but if you are creating your own currency, that adds uncertainty to the firms and to the markets in general, no? And markets don't like uncertainty, and then you have the risk of running a capital flight. So in general, we tended to say that we would like to keep the euro. But of course, then Spanish would say to us, we are not going to allow you to remain in the EU, therefore you are not going to be able to keep the euro. And then the answer that we were giving was, okay, if we are sovereign, we can decide to use the euro as our currency, and you can prevent us from doing that. And some countries have done that. For instance, Montenegro has been using the euro and is not a member of the EU. Then we had some problems with banks, because if you are using the euro but you don't belong to the European Central Bank system, then there's some problems for the banks that have their headquarters in Catalonia, because to get money from the European Central Bank, they need to get this money from a country that belongs to the EU. Then we said, okay, you can have this money from your branches in Madrid. And then there was some problems with the total amount that they can get with this type of system. What happened at the time is that during the events of the referendum, then the two banks that we still had in Catalonia, CaixaBank and Sabadell, they changed their headquarters. So in the events just following the referendum, on the 5th of October 2017, the Spanish government changed the law with a decree saying that to change the headquarters, a firm wouldn't need to call all its shareholders. That was a decision that could be taken only by the administration, by the CEOs, by the administration council. And then CaixaBank and Sabadell changed their headquarters to other cities. So now we don't have this threat of like your banks are going to run from Catalonia because they are going to be afraid of not getting money from the European Central Bank if you are expelled from the euro and they cannot use this threat anymore, because we don't have banks. We don't have banks that have their headquarters in Catalonia. And then the option when you use the euro as and you don't belong to the EU, you can have an agreement. You can sign an agreement with the European Central Bank. That's, for instance, what has Monaco or Andorra, that have a lot of banks, and they are not members of the EU, but they have a monetary agreement with the European Central Bank. And for us, the signature of a monetary agreement, you don't need unanimity. You don't need, Spain wouldn't have a veto. Nowadays, to continue being a member of the EU, the problem is the veto right that has Spain. But for a signature of a monetary agreement, there's no. We don't have this. They don't have this veto, and we don't have to run away completely the possibility that finally the European Union, if we are strong enough and we show that well, it's a matter of a fact and a fait accompli, no. That they have to adapt to Catalonia's independence, and in this sense, in the end, agree to Catalonia's membership of the European Union. We cannot exclude completely this from the equation, although we know that politically it's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah. Could you give me a flavour of what the Catalan economy would look like when Catalonia was independent? What would you do differently?
Well, I think that independence is an opportunity to do things better. It's not a guarantee to do things better. No, it depends on how we run the country afterwards. But my idea would be that of a much more Well, a combination of efficiency and social cohesion in a better way. And so an important public sector, but at the same time, an environment that is easy for firms to be innovative and to grow and to become productive and export and so on. And also I would rather think in terms of a more balanced economy in territorial terms, and more investment that is done in trains, but not large trains to connect big cities, but like by also all type of connections, tramways and train connections, such as we can see in some northern and central European countries, that we see that you can go through public transport from any city to another city in the country. And also obviously trying to tackle the climate change issues better, and investing much more in education, and universities and research.
Before we finish, I would absolutely love to just have a very brief chat about the Catalan media and how the Catalan economy is covered in the media. So could you give us just a rough idea of the media landscape in Catalonia? And let's kind of break it down in terms of what percentage, what types of media support Catalan independence, and what types of media support the status quo or still being part of Spain. A rough idea where you are on or where Catalonia and Spain is on that.
Well, we tend to complain a lot, but as I know a little bit the situation in Scotland, I would say that in terms of media, we're a little bit better than Scotland. It is true that this is linked to the language issue. It was very important for us as we recovered the official use of the language in the 80s with the devolution, with the first parliament that we had in 1980. Language issue was very important. So a project that in this respect, the first governments of Jordi Pujol did well was to create a Catalan broadcasting public company, the TV3, the Catalan TV and radio, public TV and radio. So we have this Catalan public TV and radio that uses Catalan. Pro-unionists would say that they are biased towards independence, and the pro-independence, we complain a lot about them not being biased at all and having too many pro-union in the debates and so on. But I think that means that they try to reflect Catalan society as a whole and use Catalan. Yeah, as what concerns the press, we have a newspaper, El Punt Avui, which is in Catalan, is clearly pro-independence, and another that is also more or less in the rank of the pro-independence camp, which is Ara. And then we have the other newspapers, the big newspapers, the largest newspapers, such as El Periódico La Vanguardia, are anti-independence. They are not pro-independence, but they have two editions, and one of them is in Catalan and another in Spanish.
But I know that you know Scotland quite well, and you started by saying that you're not as poorly served as Scotland. Is that your perception when you go to Scotland, that there is very much a tiny kind of window on that the independence movement has into the media?
Yes, because you don't have a public broadcasting TV, so you have the BBC Scotland, but this is a UK company, a UK public company, and I know that during the referendum, people were complaining a lot about the BBC approach in the referendum campaign. And then when I see the newspapers, clearly there's only one newspaper that has a pro-independence view, which is National.
Yeah, and of course in 2014 there was no daily newspaper that supported
Yeah, and the
independence.
National was founded
Was
after the referendum.
absolutely, yeah. No, it's really interesting to get your perspective of the media. Thank you for spending time with us on Scotonomics. It's been fascinating to hear about the Catalan economy. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks to all of you.
Okay, well, we've had some great comments, which I'll bring up and go through for people to digest and to stimulate some more discussion. But Kieran, I wonder first of all your thoughts on our interview with Elisenda.
I guess probably the big thing for me, I was disappointed that they didn't have an ambition, or she didn't rather have an ambition to set up their own central bank and have their own currency and really be free fiscally and monetarily. And yeah, sure, maybe join the euro later on, but certainly be fiscally and monetarily independent first and foremost. That was a bit disappointing. I like the way she talked about Catalonia being average right at the beginning. We'll be like an average country, but yeah, it's that was the big thing for me. I was disappointed. The rail infrastructure thing was really interesting. Thinking about smaller towns and how they're not served by this big fast rail infrastructure. Yeah, and also an interesting fact about the late baby boomers as well.
Yeah, I agree. The main thing that I picked up was this reluctance to discuss and get involved in monetary sovereignty. And when I was speaking to her and she mentioned Montenegro, I thought I've got to look and see the size of the Montenegro economy. And I've just called it up now when we had on the show, which is round about the same size as the La Liga, which is the Spanish football league in terms of revenue. So it's absolutely tiny. Again, I think it's just under $5 billion US, which would probably round about 4 billion euros. The Catalan economy is 226 billion euros. So it's using that as an example of a country. If I was arguing against Catalan independence, then it would certainly be a really strong position to say that if you're looking to still maintain the euro without having any control of the euro, when the country that you state has got an economy that's I don't know, 5% the size of yours, was really interesting. So I definitely think there's a lot more discussions to be had in Catalonia when it comes to monetary sovereignty. And I do know we've got a few people here who watch this show, so hopefully we're influencing that debate there as well. Okay, I'll pull in a couple of comments here. We've got a couple from Ian, actually. So that does look a similar situation, although as I mentioned in the comments, so we've got the same in Scotland, we give Westminster and get less back. If you look at Gers, that's not what happens. And when I showed Gers to Elisenda, she said she'd do something a little bit more detailed for us, but she just said that it's crazy that you've got a report that doesn't say how much money is spent alongside how much money is spent on behalf of the country. And she said that from an economist perspective, that just looks crazy. And Gers only has what's spent on our behalf, not what's spent in Scotland. So it was interesting that she said that, and there's no argument or discussion in Spain. Everyone knows that Catalonia puts more into the Spanish exchequer than it gets back, not the situation in Scotland. Another one from Ian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know we agree about that, Kieran, but we've also spoken, I'd like to see other people's comments on this as well. We've also suggested that when Scotland becomes independent, we have to have the same perspective to Edinburgh and the Central Belt. And we have to look at independence as an opportunity to have much more community and local control of our economy and our society. It's not just a case of removing it from Westminster and plonking it in the Central Belt. So we completely agree with you there, Ian. Another comment from Lee here. And yeah, I mentioned that very briefly. It's the biggest political issue in Spain and has been for several years. But this year, there's definitely a blockage in terms of how we move this forward, but it's still discussed on all the TV channels, in the Parliament, and in all the newspaper. It's very different from how the constitutional situation is discussed in the UK. And final one from Charles.
Oh yeah.
So it's good that we are seeing some of the similarities here, from what's happening in Catalonia and what's happening in Scotland and the UK. So I'll just see if we've got another couple of comments here. Trains, you can tell our demographic at the moment, a lot of chat around trains. It's incredible here, it really is, and you know, I'm sure everyone sees it when they travel compared to how it is in the United Kingdom. Can you remember what the train service was like when you were living in the Netherlands, Kieran?
Much cheaper. And yes, very regular, and probably actually not, the train carriages weren't quite as luxurious as the ones here, I would say. They were more basic, but they were more regular, and it seemed to be more well served. I mean, this is certainly an issue that we've got in the UK as well, you know, the trains going up and down the country, but not so much across.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a comment here from Charles. Thanks very much, Charles. If Catalonia is not regarded as the EU as a continuing state, would it not have to start with its own currency? Listening to Elisenda, they don't think that's necessarily the case, because they're continuing with the currency that's in use. So it's slightly different from where Scotland would be, because we couldn't just migrate to the euro, but they could adopt it and say that they were using it already. So slightly different there. I'll show Hashbury Stumbles. That's trains. He was the one who commented on that. We've got another comment here.
Sorry, I missed that. What was that?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just put that one. I don't know where it's gone. Yeah, so thanks very much for your comments. What I wanted to kind of mention was, when I was speaking to Elisenda, I was thinking, yeah, your infrastructure is not that good here, rail infrastructure, but it's so much better than the rail infrastructure in Scotland. I was thinking, yeah, public transport's not that cheap, but it's so much cheaper than it is in Scotland. And I was thinking, yeah, the media is not completely balanced, but it's so much more balanced than it is in the United Kingdom. And then finally, I was thinking, yeah, your pensions aren't great, but so much better than the pensions that we're getting in the United Kingdom. So it's very difficult being here, because in Catalonia, you don't want to say to people, yeah, but you've got it really good, because you have to see that they've got genuine concerns. But I hope that's come across in the show tonight, is that the Catalans tend to complain about these things, and they're much more aware of the issues of the state than I think we are, or a lot of people are in Scotland. And it's, you know, that's what we're hoping to do with the Small Nation series, is show you that these small nations do things very differently from the United Kingdom, and very differently to how we do in Scotland, and a lot more along the lines of what we could do as a small monetary sovereign nation. So I hope that came across from our talk tonight. Before we go, Kieran,
we could have our central bank in Perth, couldn't we? You know, it could become the new financial centre. Why not? So,
yeah, exactly. And then, you know, the discussion you had at conference around making sure that the civil service was spread across the Scotland is a really powerful vision, I think, for an independent Scotland. I wanted to finish tonight firstly by saying thanks to our new viewers on the other channels, but also I wanted to highlight that we've got a major announcement to make, and that was we launched a Patreon on Monday. And if you haven't come across Patreon before, you pay a small amount every month and you get some extra access, extra features to Scotonomics. The show will always be live and free to air on Independence Live, but to allow us to do a lot more research, hopefully some live events and a couple of documentaries this year, we really need a little bit more funding to help us do this. So please do consider joining our Patreon. You get things like extended interviews, and you get them first. So normally on a Monday before the show goes live on a Wednesday, but sometimes maybe even a week, 2 weeks before, and there's also audio on there. And the final thing I wanted to say, as a Patreon, you get to join our new monthly book club. And this is the first book that we are covering, which is The New Economics by Steve Keen. And Kieran, you've got to be honest, have you started yet?
Yes, yeah, I'm probably about a quarter of the way through it just now. Yeah.
Well done. There's my bookmark, and it's at the end because I haven't started it yet. So I've got pretty busy at the moment with some other things, but I'll definitely do it. Not only do you get the opportunity you have to pay for the book yourself, but you get the opportunity to chat about the book with other Patreons, and also, which is a major coup for us, you get to attend a live interview with Professor Steve Keen and ask him questions, which is quite incredible considering how incredibly busy a fellow he is. So if you do join the Patreon, we'd really, really appreciate it. If not, absolutely no problem, and we'll still be live. I think that's all I had to say. I think there's another couple of comments. Thanks very much, Charles. And I think there's a supporter of your central bank in Perth. Yes. Have you ever been to the Twatams? Have you ever been to the Twatams in Perth?
No, have you?
Yes, I have. One of the best small music venues in Scotland. I toured with a few bands in that place, and yeah, it's a very interesting local bar. Asprey Stumble. I'll see you there in a few years when we manage to get this all happening and in place. Thanks very much for everyone joining us tonight. We'll see you next week. We've got a fantastic show looking at a policy around land emissions tax, and then the following week we're looking at banking deserts, and then the following week we're doing community wealth, and we've also got 2 incredible interviews coming up in February. Kieran, do you want to tell the audience who we are speaking to at the start of February?
So we'll be speaking very soon to Warren Mosler, of MMT fame, and as you've heard from already, we'll be speaking to Steve Keen again about his books. So really excited about those, and yeah, those are the 2 big ones.
No, you've missed one. You've missed one.
I missed one. Yeah.
Yep.
Which one have I missed?
David McWilliams.
Oh, yes, that's Monday. We're going to
yeah. So we're interviewing David McWilliams, who's an incredible economist. I'm sure many of you will have heard of, and he's going to be speaking about Ireland and a similar kind of interview that we've done with Catalonia. So please do drop us any suggestions on topics that you want us to cover or people you want us to talk to. Hopefully, if you're new to the show, you've got a flavour for the types of things that we are looking to do. Thanks so much for your time so far, and until next time, from myself in Barcelona and from Kieran in Aberdeen. Bye now.
Bye. Bye.